Hey, biology students, welcome to another podcast. This focus is going to be on the kingdom fungi, and today we're going to cover general characteristics. We're going to take a look at how they're able to obtain nutrients and how these group of organisms are able to reproduce. So as we begin, just some general characteristics about the fungi kingdom. So as we've looked at so far, the archaean eubacteria are classified as prokaryotes. So now we are starting to adventure into the domain eukarya, which includes the fungi. So these are all eukaryotic organisms, which means they have cells with a nucleus. Most of the fungus are multicellular, which means they have complex tissues that make up their structures. So when we look at a mushroom like these in this picture, we're actually only seeing a small amount of that actual organism. Most fungi grow underground. So the other exception to the multicellular organisms are the yeast. So yeast are a type of fungus that are single-celled. So as we look at fungus in class, we're going to focus on the cells and their specialization, and these includes molds, mushrooms, yeast, mildew. These are all of the organisms that belong in the kingdom fungi. Very diverse group, inhabit many different places on this planet. So in terms of how do these things feed? Well, they feed by using a variety of different methods, but for the most part, they all secrete some type of enzyme outside of their cells to digest the material that they want to absorb nutrients from. So some of these can be considered saprophytes. So this is a term we saw when we learned about bacteria. Saprophyte means they can decompose dead things. So very often if you're out in the woods, you can notice fungi growing on the sides of trees or growing in the ground where they're decomposing something. And again, when you see the mushroom or this bracket fungi, you're actually seeing the reproductive part of that fungus. Sometimes we have fungi that can be parasitic, which means they harm the host. So here we have a nice little graphic of someone that has athlete's foot. So athlete's foot is caused by a fungus. It grows in the dermal layers of the skin, in between the toes. It likes that type of environment because it's usually nice and warm and nice and moist. Those are the perfect environments for fungus to grow. But to the downside, it can cause major irritation, itching, and sometimes it can get to a point where it leads to infection. So some fungi are parasitic, and some can be classified as mutualistic, which means they live together in harmony and in peace with another species. So here you have an example of a lichen. These typically grow on the sides of trees or rocks, and it's a combination of a fungus and an algae living together. So the fungus provides a mutualistic relationship with the algae provides a home for the fungus, and the fungus provides nutrients for the algae, and they live harmoniously together in a mutualistic relationship. So all fungi are heterotrophic, and they rely upon getting energy from another source. So they can either be saprophytic, parasitic, or mutualistic. And in terms of reproduction, most fungi will reproduce sexually. Since they are multicellular, they typically will reproduce by releasing spores from their reproductive structure. So in this case, we're looking at a mushroom, and within that mushroom underneath are gills, and these gills produce tiny little reproductive cells called spores. And don't get caught up in the terminology zygote or diploid, but just realize that these spores are their reproductive cells. When these spores land, they will start growing and dividing, and they will start extending these what are called hyphae in the ground or in your feet or on the dead branch of a tree. They will start extending these. You can't see them, but they grow, and grow, and then when two hyphae of two different cells merge together, the fusion of hyphae hyphae happen, and this is where sexual reproduction occurs. When this occurs, they are then ready to combine their genetic information. They will grow more of this hyphae, which is called mycelium, and produce the reproductive structure, which is in this case, the mushroom. So that's generally how they reproduce. Yeast, on the other hand, single cell, they can simply reproduce by asexual reproduction, by mitosis. So the fungi are a very interesting group of organisms. They have a lot of specialties, and we're going to take a look at a few of them in class when we get into the lab. So we will look at some bread mold, and when we look at bread mold, you're going to be looking at these 3 specific types of cells found within bread mold. We'll look at some yeast. Nothing flashy, they're small, and we're just going to be able to see that they are single-celled, and we'll be able to learn a little bit about how these things reproduce and divide. And Coprinus is basically the genus of the mushrooms. So I'll stop at the grocery store, pick up some mushrooms for us to look at, and when we look at the underside of the mushroom, we'll see sporangium, sporangiophores, and spores underneath high power, and that's what we'll see. So these are the 3 sample cells that we're going to look at when we get into the fungus kingdom. So make sure you have some notes on these and bring those to class so we can use that to kind of build on some of your observations that you're going to be making in class. So next time you happen to come across a fungi, at a restaurant, don't be surprised. I've been at many restaurants where a fungi walks in and they look around and they're kind of upset because there's no tables for them to sit down, and they leave simply because there wasn't mushroom.